What's going on, y'all? This is Rob. Man. Son. Okay. So we got to talk about Miss Marvel, the season. Okay, we got to do the review. Whatever, who cares? So a girl gets powers, and the white government chick is evil, and against all odds, she saves the day. Roll credits. Okay, so let's talk about the big thing from the ending of the episode. The big thing from the ending of the episode. Okay. Son. Okay. Mutants. All right, now here's the thing. I was a little worried at first, right? Because I was afraid Bruno was gonna be like, I was looking at your genes, Miss Marvel, because I'm a weirdo. That's what I do. It's how I court girls. Like, hey, I like you, girl, so I tested your genes. So he's like, I ran over your genes, and there's something off about him, and I thought he was gonna be like something inhuman, and I was gonna be like, no, because nobody wants the Inhumans. The Inhumans don't even want the Inhumans, man. Like, if you don't believe me, check this out. There was a story that was written during Jonathan Hickman's Avengers, New Avengers Son. Oh my God. There's a story that was written during that story called Infinity, and Black Bolt detonated the Terrigen bomb when he tried to beat Thanos and got his ass whooped because Black Bolt sucks. And all these people across the world who were Inhumans started waking up, and the Inhuman royal family was like, hey, do you guys want to come hang out with us? And they were like, nope. And we're gonna go hang out with the X-Men. And that's exactly what they did. So when Bruno came out and he was like, there's like a mutation there, then they played the X-Men music. I was like, son. Man, let me tell you something, man. It was amazing. Okay, so look, so here's the thing, right? This opens up so many possibilities, because as soon as I saw this, I was like, man, the possibilities are endless, son. Because like, I started thinking about all the crazy things that have happened in comics that can happen in the MCU now. Like, oh my God, Franklin Richards. Dude, okay, so I started thinking about that, and I was like, man, imagine seeing Franklin Richards in the MCU. Let me tell you something, man. All the stuff y'all have seen in the movie so far, it doesn't matter, man. Franklin Richards, dude's a beast. So check this out. There's a story during Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run. Man, this is the craziest story ever. So Franklin Richards, as a kid, gets his powers woken up by his adult self for something that's gonna happen. You don't know what it is until you get to the end of the story, because Jonathan Hickman takes forever to make sense. So like, at the end of the story, these mad Celestials from an alternate reality show up in the universe, because Reed Richards was screwing stuff up, and literally Franklin Richards from the future comes to the past and then takes the power of his younger self and resurrects Galactus from the dead. It's like the most beast moment ever. So literally, like, Galactus was defeated by the mad Celestials. He's basically dead. And then like Franklin takes power of his younger self, and he's just like, to me, my Galactus, and like resurrects him. So it's just like, damn. All right. So then the Celestials try to fight Galactus and Franklin Richards as a team up. Son. They were not prepared. And that's the thing, man. That's the kind of stuff you get, because Franklin Richards is a mutant, and mutants are, on the whole, more powerful than everybody else. They're the most broken-ass group of superheroes ever, right? If superheroes were a gun from video games, they'd be the Golden Gun from like the original GoldenEye, or the FAMAS from Black Ops 1. They were just ridiculously overpowered, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy some of the stuff that they can do. So my thought is, okay, cool. So Kamala Khan is basically a mutant here. That's the whole base behind her genes, but that's a big statement that Bruno made. Because when it comes to mutants in Marvel Comics, one of the things to know is that it's not their genes that are adjusted, it's an X gene, right? It's a singular gene in their body that activates usually during puberty, but can also be done at moments of high duress, and then that basically leads to them developing powers, right? Now, sometimes they manifest really, really early. Like in the case of Hope Summers, the first mutant born after the events of House of M, her powers activated when she was a baby, right? So it's just kind of like, okay, that's really crazy. But, and then you had the whole story where like Cable took her into the future, and it was nuts, and then she became the new host for the Phoenix Force and Avengers vs. X-Men and wrecked everybody's shit. Hope Summers is ridiculously OP. She has the powers to copy the powers of everyone she sees, and there's no limit to the number of powers she can copy, and she can use them endlessly. She's like Peter Petrelli from Heroes. So that right there, right? Like, just levels of power get crazy when you talk about mutants. Now, for those of you guys who don't know anything about the history of mutants in Marvel Comics, this is when things get really, really cool, right? This is when things are really, really cool. And it fits imperfect with the MCU, although I don't know how they're going to do it with the Celestials. So, the way this worked is, in the early days on Earth, you basically had a group called the Wanderers, right? Which were basically the missing link between like Primate Man and Modern Man. And there weren't a ton of them, there were just some of them. And you still had like a whole bunch of humans, or, baseline humans, whatever, running around the world. Anyway, what ended up happening is the Celestials showed up on Earth, and through some weird stuff that they're never going to do in the MCU, you ended up basically basically seeing the Wonders gathered together by the Celestials. And the Celestials started experimenting on their genes. Now, 1/3 of that group went on to become deviants. We already know where they originate from in the MCU, so that doesn't apply here. The second group became the Eternals. We know where they originate, so that doesn't apply here. And the third group had their genes modified so that at some future point in time, those genes would start to activate. Now, Marvel used that as an explanation, one, to explain where mutants come from, but two, how it is that somebody like Steve Rogers could be exposed to like all these crazy ass forms of radiation and become Captain America instead of just a giant mass of tumors. So that's what Marvel Comics does, right? Now, how they're gonna do that in the MCU, I'm not entirely sure, because what it sounds like is maybe it's just an evolved state, right? Like quite literally the next stage of human evolution. Because that's how it always was when it came to mutants in the MCU, in the comics, is mutants were considered the next stage of human evolution, even though mutants had artificially had their genes modified by Celestials. So they weren't a true evolutionary process. Kind of, but not really. But I feel like the MCU would actually adapt that, right? That like Kamala Khan and people like her are just the next stage in human evolution, right? Genes have just modified or evolved or whatever it is, and suddenly people are developing natural powers. But the big thing about this is that the difference between like mutants and say, for example, like the Inhumans is that one, Inhumans suck and mutants don't. And two, there's a limitless number of powers that mutants can have, right? There's no limit there. So mutants can have powers ranging from like telepathy, telekinesis, the ability to alter reality on a universal scale, like quite literally just altering reality with no definitive limit. Like, what is it? Clyde Wincham, right? The Marquis of Death. That guy had the power, like he was wiping out whole universes with a wave of his hand. And that guy was a mutant, right? That's the kind of power that you're talking about here. So if you can imagine it, they can have it. But what's so cool about this, right, isn't even necessarily the mutants themselves, it's the villains, right? Like William Stryker. So William Stryker is like the best villain ever when it comes to mutants in Marvel Comics. Like the biggest issue that you had was like in the X-Men movies, which were ass. William Stryker was like a military guy. And it kind of makes sense that they would do that because in the comics, he's like this religious fundamentalist who thinks it's his mission from God to kill mutants. So if Fox had like done that, like, hey guys, here's William Stryker. He's some crazy ass pastor that wants to kill mutants, that like 80% of white folks would be pissed. So like obviously they weren't gonna do that. But the thing here is like in the MCU, they can get away with it, man, because like who's gonna not watch it, right? Like the people are gonna protest it and then be left out of the conversation and go see it anyway. So like there's characters like William Stryker who are cool. Like William Stryker is one of the best villains ever when it comes to mutants in Marvel Comics, right? There's Magneto, people like that. But the long and short, and the point that I'm making here in this great big huge long ass rant that I'm going on is the introduction of mutants into the MCU. It really is a slow process, right? They really are staging this as a slow process. And that makes the most sense, right? It makes the most sense that they would make it this slow, gradual process instead of doing it right off the bat. I still say they should originate this, or at least the discovery of it, with like Wolverine, right? Like they should still do that. That like Wolverine was basically like he was a mutant whose gene was discovered by like Hydra when it was initially taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. because Hydra was trying to create more Captain Americas in secret. And that led to them basically learning about like the mutant gene and everything. Because I have to believe that Bruno's not the only person who knows about this. And I think there's a lot of other organizations who are aware of it and potentially trying to track them down. But whatever the case happens to be, man, like this is a ridiculously amazing development for Kamala Khan, because I never agreed with the idea of her being an Inhuman. I never liked that, right? I mean, her character was cool. She had some cool stories, but I never liked her being an Inhuman because I felt like it was just a hugely missed opportunity to roll her into the X-Men where she would have been a lot more effective and a lot more interesting. Such as it is, right? She was on Champions, which was a really, really good comic and stuff like that, but I'm excited about this, right? This is a hugely exciting moment. And that's how I think we're gonna start seeing mutants rolled into the MCU from this point going forward until we get the full-on introduction of the X-Men. Is that it's going to be people by whatever manner and whatever means, something happens, and then it's just like this person has a genetic mutation, right? Like this person has like some kind of gene in their body, or at least the modification of their genes, and that's what's leading them to become who they are. Because with the nature of the Celestials in the MCU, there's nothing to indicate that they're responsible for the creation of mutants in the first place, right? Because it wasn't as though, you know, powers on Earth originated from the Celestials' grand experiment. They created the Deviants and the Eternals out there in space somewhere, right? As like robots, basically. And that's essentially all it's been. So there's no reason to believe the Celestials are involved here. It's just people whose genes are modified and those who have powers. Now, the big question that I would ask here is, how far reaching is this? Right? How far reaching does this go? I mean, you're literally talking about like damage control, trying to find people with powers, so maybe damage control knows, and maybe there's like instances out there where like his powers are activating and like no one knows what's going on or how to control it. Like that's what happened with Cyclops. His powers, if I remember correctly, his power, I think maybe it was in the movie or something like that, but like his powers activated in a classroom, right? Like when it came to Jean Grey, her powers activated and she couldn't control the telepathic thoughts of everybody around her and was slowly going insane until Xavier found her. So like it was like a lot of those little things there, right? In the MCU, I could see that being the case. The way they build up to it is more of a background thing, right? Like some TV blip or something like that, where it's like, and in other news today, another superpowered being has done this or that or something like that, and no one knows how to explain this sudden rise of people that have superpowers, and that's it, right? It's like a 10-second news blip in the background of a show, and that's it, right? I feel like that'd be a great way to do that. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. I mean, okay, so overall, Miss Marvel, yeah, great show, cool. I had a great time watching it. It was fun, whatever. But thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.